Hello and welcome to this episode of the World's Best Coaches series. Today I am joined by Chris Paton. We are going around the world at the moment interviewing the best of the best when it comes to the coaching consultancy world. Now, Chris Paton is the managing director of Quirk Solutions. Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you for a second to kind of give everyone a brief introduction of what you guys do over there.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. We are a consultancy that is very much people and behaviors, culture orientated. So do a lot in and around leadership development, transformation and change, things like that. I've been running the business for the last 12 years, but for 18 years prior to that, I was in the Royal Marines visiting a whole bunch of holiday hotspots around the world.
Right, okay. I did manage to check out your background a little bit, and my goodness me, it is you have a vast experience in various different areas. Now, tell me a little bit more about that. Prior to joining this world of consultancy.
Yeah, I was in the Royal Marines from 1994 to 2012. It's obviously quite a specialist part of the UK military, and it was an incredible thing to be part of. It's a tribe that is difficult to get into, with a selection process that is fairly tough, and then I did a whole range of different roles within that as I went through my career. So everything from being in small teams of three people, talking jets onto targets a long way from home, to being the head of strategy on Afghanistan, to the UK Prime Minister at one point, um, being an advisor to the French Navy and the French Naval Headquarters in Paris for 3 years. Yeah, it's been a fascinating life, in United Nations tours in war torn conflict areas and all the rest of it. Which is why I now have very little hair. Most of it is grey and hearing aids.
No way. Well, tell me about that transition coming out of the Royal Marines into this world of business. How did you find that, and how did that help you?
It was very accidental, to be honest.
Right.
So a friend of mine who is a university lecturer sent me through an article about, and it was a business article, and said, what do you think about this? And I'd come out of, at that point in time, I was operating within the UK government. Even I was in the Ministry of Defence doing the Afghan strategy role, and I came out of a meeting that left me probably best described as a low simmering rage, and got back to my desk to find this article, read it, which was all about sometimes the situations are so dynamic and uncertain and volatile and ambiguous that you can't really work out what to do, no matter what the question is, never mind what the answers might be. And so it's very challenging to do anything about it. And I took the pleasure of ranting back at my keyboard for an hour back to my friend, saying, this is nonsense, this is how you'd go about it, this is what you do. And he really liked it and bounced it back to me a couple of times. We worked on it a little bit of time, a few times, and through his connections, Dr. Arnu Franken managed to get me accidentally published in the Harvard Business Review. And that then led to people getting in touch, saying, quite interested in what you've written. Can you come and give a talk to us? So I was still serving in the military at this point in time. But all of a sudden, I'm being flown to New York to give a talk to the C-suite of the Fortune 500, and you're like thinking, okay, might be some career choices going on here. I'd done 18, over nearly 19 years in the Marines, and it felt like, at that point, it was an opportunity to maybe do something a little bit different. So I started to cast my net around a little bit, see what was out there, and um, eventually found myself running my own consultancy, but only through a slightly traumatic experience of trying to join a startup that didn't quite work out.
Right. Okay. And so with Quirk, you obviously mentioned that you work with a lot of culture and people. How do you guys, how does that reflect in your own business? How many team have you got there?
The total team size with all of the associates and the core team is 25 people.
Wow.
We have a range of different individuals. We've got a really nice balance of different people, different backgrounds. So they can all bring a different approach to the work that we do, and that enables us. Some are superb, female military, former military leaders. Some are hugely experienced commercial leaders, and so everybody can bring their different facets to what we're doing. Everybody's been working in the commercial world for a long time. I don't take people that have left the military and come straight out and straight into business, although I do a lot of mentoring for people like that. So we have a nice balance in terms of background, gender, belief, experience, approaches, and that allows us to put the right person to the right client and match them up nicely so that the chemistry works.
Yeah. So what does a typical project look for you guys when you start working with a company? I'm curious.
It can be all sorts. So we do everything from a 2 hour workshop where people are coming in and they're saying, I want to game and stress test this particular initiative that we're looking to take forward to work out whether it's going to work or not, because it's something that we did a lot in the military,
Yeah.
was that whole gaming and stress testing of plans before we walked out of the door. So we've done work like that for really large corporates like Mercedes and Shell and Waitrose and others, but we've also done it for startups and scale ups that are trying to take their businesses forward. Um, you've then got sort of half day sessions where we will be doing maybe some leadership work and some leadership development work to help people improve their leadership capabilities. Or they run on to 2 day and 5 day leadership packages. And then we go all the way out to 18 months of transformation and change for maybe a larger organization that's trying to shift the whole part of what it does, which is work that we've done in that respect, in with Waitrose, but also Drax, Power Station, and others. So it's a full end-to-end spectrum of really small, short interventions, right the way up to something that's quite long-term and has a meaningful change on an organization's direction.
Well, I'm sure it took quite a while for you to kind of figure out exactly what you're going to deliver to these businesses. I'm sure it took a few years to kind of fully understand what you guys were all about. And so, in terms of what it looks like from a project point of view and everything, what kind of hurdles have you kind of come across in your time? How have you overcome them, in business?
That's a really good question, to be honest, Sam. It's so the first challenge that I bumped into was, well, you're just a military person. What do you know? Because obviously I left the military, and this business didn't suddenly become 20, 25 people strong. It was initially just me on my own. Um, so there was an initial reticence around me having little commercial experience. There was also a reticence around a perspective that, well, if you're military, you're just going to come in and start shouting at everybody, because that's how leaders lead in the military. That complete misunderstanding of military leadership. About empowering people, enabling people, giving people, the authority to make their own decisions. And the people, there was a number of organizations didn't really understand that. So that was quite challenging. Um, I was also a point in which I'm on my own and I'm trying to earn enough money to pay a mortgage. So I was probably a bit too transactional in some of my conversations with potential clients, a bit too pushy. It was kind of make a decision, get on the bus or get off the bus because I need to move on.
Yeah.
So I've learned over the 12 years, much more around, the sorts of people we're working with now and the organizations I'm working with now, I've had relationships with, and the business and the rest of my team have had relationships with for years. So that was something that I learned and was a bit of a barrier. Um, then as we've gone on more into the work that we do around diagnosing culture or doing leadership development programs, there is this sense of, well, I haven't really got time to take people out of their day-to-day job to put them onto something to then bring them back. And the organizations that get that and that understand that sometimes you've got to slow down a little bit to speed up. If you take your time now to give people some time, yes, it does mean you're going a little bit slower, but it means that ultimately in the future you're going to be much higher tempo, much more effective, much more efficient. So those are the sort of the familiar challenges that we face.
Right. Okay. And you obviously mentioned that you've got a team of experts, people that have had, great experience in various different avenues. And I think that that's key. It's one thing that we do here is, we always look to hire the next specialist, the next expert in their field, because we may not be able to deliver as well as they can. So it's always about getting people that, I don't want to sound so blunt, but they're better than you, at that area. And it's good to keep on building that kind of culture. Yeah.
I mean, my approach now has always been to surround myself with people who are a lot better than me at everything, right? that's that's the only way in which I've ever got to where I've got to, or done what, or achieved what I've achieved, whether it's been in the military or commercially. It's to have an amazing bunch of people who, are much better than you at running the governance of a business, at doing the sales in a business, at doing the delivery of the content that you go out and deliver, at designing the content, at doing the technology, the platform that we've built. There's no way in which I'm going to suddenly produce a platform that does cultural diagnostics, right? Somebody needs to help me with that and to do that. So yeah, I am a big fan of surround yourself by brilliant people and then get out of their way.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we talk a lot about accountability here on the series, and especially with the work that we do. We've had the privilege of working with probably over 1,000 different kind of coaches and consultants over the years, people that have various strengths and niches that they're in. But accountability is always the one that's mentioned is so important, because when you look at a sports person, or even if you looked in the military, there's always someone that's commanding the group. There's someone that is, giving the guidance and also keeping everyone in line and in check and, accountable for what they do. And I think coaching is a big part of that. What kind of situations have you kind of come across where you're not necessarily working on just the day to day, but you're just keeping people in check over time and accountable to goals that they set?
Yeah, I have a philosophy that is probably about 180 degrees the opposite of what you just described.
Right.
Um, for me, if the team require me to hold them to account, we've got something badly wrong.
Okay.
It should be that the individuals are holding themselves to account and they are holding, each other accountable. So for me, it's about setting boundaries that allow me to explain to people, look, here's the what and the why, but I'm going to allow you to come up with the how within those boundaries. Over to you, right? And if you come back and haven't been successful, and you haven't been successful within those frameworks, and you had everything that you needed to, then there's only one person that's got this wrong, right? And I find that grows people an awful lot more, because if you are always holding them to account, then they always take the easy route, which is to sit back and wait for you to tell them what to do,
Yeah.
to tell them how to do it, to make sure that they're on time. And that just breeds an organization whereby everything is dependent on the leadership
Yeah.
rather than on the teams themselves.
No, absolutely, and I do agree. I think you're very right, and it differs obviously across the board. But yeah, I think yeah, absolutely, you're right. Yeah, so looking at your transition from your career now into the consultancy side and what you do at Quirk. Now, if I was to be leaving a corporate company right now, I've been in corporate for 20 years and I've decided to kind of go into your industry. What kind of advice would you give me right now in the middle of that transition period to help me start off really well?
I think the first thing is to really work hard on being tuned to the people that you're going to be talking to. Um, you know, understanding them as individuals and treating each person as an individual, not going into an organization and looking at it as a set of component parts that need to fit together well, like an engine. And if you get all the component parts and the teams operating together, then the whole thing's going to operate. For me, in the world that I operate in, it's about understanding each individual and what makes them up and how we get the most out of them. That's been true through my military career as much as my commercial career, as much as the work that I now do with organizations. If you want to shift Drax power station from where it was to where it needed to get to over 18 months, that is led and driven and pushed by a whole bunch of individuals acting in a collegiate manner. It's not about a bunch of departments suddenly clicking to change the direction of where they're going. So self-awareness, I think, is really important. Whether it be you're doing, all the different types of methodologies, we use insights. We use insights profiles a lot to do psychometrics. But there's also, the GC in index, you've got disc models, you've got Myers-Briggs, there's all sorts of stuff like that. But I think being self-aware of who you are as an individual and therefore the types of people that you can connect with in different ways, that is also super important. So
Yeah.
that when you're going into a room, which will have a whole bunch of different people in that room, knowing how you should react and behave to connect with the different people with the different approaches, I think is really important for any consultant. It's not about your skills and your knowledge in terms of helping them develop leadership or strategy or consultancy, whatever else it might be. It's about your skills to be able to build a genuine relationship with somebody and bring them with you to somewhere that they get even better than they currently are.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned disc profiling there, and that's something that we adopted many years ago. We tend to disc profile all of our kind of new prospects for employees. Also, our clients are usually disc profiled, so we know the best ways to approach people and communicate and work with them. Yeah, it's a great piece of software and profiling. Yeah, yeah, awesome.
Absolutely.
So, what's the plan for Quirk in the future? We like to ask everyone this because it's always good to know what people's goals are. But what is the plan for you guys?
We are looking to be an organization that people would look at and go, we really want to be part of that, or we really want that organization to be part of us.
Yeah.
So, it's building something that has tangible value in terms of what it brings to the organization it works with, but also as an organization in its own entity. I'm not going to be in the business forever, inevitably. Okay, so I set it up and I started it from scratch on my own, but it's built into a business now. That business is not suddenly going to fold and disappear overnight. So there will be a point in time at which I step away and leave the rest of the team to it,
Yeah.
and they grow on the business in its own direction. So I think for me, I I like all sorts of books and read all sorts of books, but legacy and the whole book around the All Blacks and the rugby team is a big one for me. And that one chapter within there about legacy, about leaving the shirt in a better place than you had when you had it on, that is something that's important to me. So I want to be part of an organization that's grown into something that's really quite fun to be part of and is making a difference for a whole bunch of different client organizations, but one that when I step away, there's a group of people within it
Yeah.
who are taking it forward onto its next piece, and that legacy then continues.
Amazing, amazing. That's fantastic. So obviously the world is changing quite a bit. The way that people are learning is changing. There's always new businesses and ventures coming out of the cracks all every day. How do you guys kind of modeling yourself around that? Do you adapt the way that you approach businesses and teach them and work with them on like a yearly model, or how do you adapt?
Yeah, I think um, Heraclitus, is a Stoic philosopher from Roman times who said that change is the only constant.
Yeah,
And it is entirely true. You have to keep changing as business. You have to keep adapting. We all know that, and that's part of the challenge, right? I mean, if somebody produces the business plan for the next 12 months and it's essentially let's just repeat what we've done for the last 12 months, it doesn't make any sense. And we would all listen to that sort of phrase and go, well, of course it doesn't make any sense. So by inference, we're always changing. And I think that, yes, when I look at our own business, it has changed a lot over time. We've gone from, being an organization that very much initially focused on strategy and on strategy implementation and how do you get people to buy into strategy implementation. Then we went through a period where the gaming and the stress testing of plans became super popular,
yeah,
and we had 3, 4, 5 years where we became known for, quite well known for supporting a number of different corporate organizations on gaming, including help being the operational readiness consultancy for the Dubai World Expo and getting them ready to receive 110,000 visitors a day. you know that's quite awesome pieces of work to go and do. And then
yeah, yeah.
you get organizations saying, well, actually it's the leadership side of things that we're really struggling with, or acquisitions that we're really struggling with. So we adapted then onto leadership and leadership through acquisitions and organizations that are scaling quite rapidly. And then we find ourselves now at the point where we have this digital platform that enables us to do a culture diagnostic of an organization, to look at the microcultures within the organization. So at different levels or different tenures or different departments, what are the differences in culture across the organization? And how do you connect that all up to make it better? So we have iterated and changed and developed as the market has changed as to what it wants from us and of us. But I think we've also changed with the things that have stood out to us as being important or valuable.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we find ourselves now in this position where we can do strategy, and for certain clients, we're doing strategy. But for a lot of it is about people, behaviors, culture, leadership, because the world that we find ourselves now in being quite complex, but also with generational changes coming through, there's a lot that organizations are trying to deal with, and that to us feels important. And it also feels to us to be somewhere that we can bring a lot of our breadth and depth of expertise through what we've got.
Amazing. Well, to wrap it up, we always like to ask one great question. You already mentioned something about the All Blacks, and it might be your answer, but we like everyone to recommend one book that you think everybody should be reading or should have read. Now, do you have one in mind?
I've got one right here, which is my absolute go-to Bible at the moment. It's called Humanocracy,
Okay,
um, and it's by Gary Hamel and Michelle Zanini. And it's, yeah, creating organizations as amazing as the people inside them.
cool.
And I think that is absolutely the book that people should be reading if they haven't already read it, about the power of enabling people in organizations to make decisions at lower levels, for leadership to set out the frameworks that allow people to make decisions all the way through the organization. So you become higher tempo, better margins, better performance, better ROI, and with less churn, going on. There's one organization they quote within there called Buurtzorg, which is a Dutch healthcare provider
Yeah.
that's 15,000 people strong, but there's only about 80 people in their core headquarters. Everybody else operates in independent cells, doing their own P&Ls, their own client recruitment, their own people recruitment, their own business development, managing their own budgets. And yet, as an organization, they have a 30% higher client satisfaction rating than any of their competitors and 50% less staff churn.
Wow.
So, yeah, for me, that is a book to have a real good dig into.
Well, I'm going to have to check that out. I'm going to go and buy it myself straight away. That sounds really cool. But if everyone wants to come and find you, how do they reach out to you?
So if they go to quirksolutions.co.uk, Quirk solutions.co.uk, you'll find us on the website and the description of what we do. People will also find me, obviously, on LinkedIn and that side of things. So yeah, feel free to look us up and any of those aspects.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on, Chris. It's been a pleasure. It's been great to hear about your story as well. But yeah, take care.
Thanks very much, Sam, and you.